So I'm talking with George Altgelt, and he is the owner of GeoGrowers, which is a company that produces amazing soil that mineralizes the ground, and he's a whiz with plants of all kinds. And he is going to share with us why Sulfurzyme and sulfur, but the Young Living Sulfurzyme, which contains MSM and wolfberry powder, which is important because it has vitamin C in it. So he's going to share why that's important for the cardiovascular system.
Yes. Well, let me start by saying sulfur is very, very important for health. Sulfur is one of those materials, one of those elements that is more and more in short supply from conventionally raised foodstuffs, because it's less of it in the soil and there's less microbial life to actually do the work of conducting sulfur into the root system of the plant. The sulfur we're talking about here is elemental sulfur, and that's what Sulfurzyme is, and that's the best form for absorbing sulfur into the human body. And the Sulfurzyme product is really tasty. I don't know if you've ever had pure elemental sulfur. It is exquisitely bitter. But if you add wolfberry to it and sweeten it with a little bit of, what is that sweetened with?
Is it, I'm not sure, it might be stevia?
It's stevia, yes, okay. It's stevia. Once it's sweetened, you can eat it by the spoonful. Easy to do. And among Sulfurzymes and sulfur, among its many attributes and positives is it is a great way to detoxify the body.
Cool. Now, one other thing is when we say sulfur, we're meaning MSM also, right?
Right.
It's the same thing. So
right.
That could be confusing to people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and as someone who studied nutrition, I would say you would like to have two sources of sulfur: MSM, Sulfurzyme, and then your sulfur-bearing foods. Now, most of my information about sulfur is coming from a molecular biologist named Stephanie Sneff, and I believe her last name is spelled S-N-E-F-F, and she does all kinds of research in the molecular realm, and one of her areas of interest has been how sulfur interacts with the cardiovascular system in order to make the microcirculation through capillaries much more efficient. And she has evidence from research and experimentation that sulfur in the human body is responsible for drawing the red corpuscles through the capillaries in a cardiovascular system. Imagine having something shaped like an inner tube for a tire, and someone somehow managed to bend it so that one side touches the other. That's what a red blood cell does when it's traveling through capillaries. And you can actually run into a log jam trying to stuff red corpuscles through a capillary, because even after they fold themselves in half, they're still larger than a capillary, which is really interesting, because if that's the case, how do red corpuscles manage to get through a capillary? Well, the first thing you need to know is the heart is not pumping the blood. The heart is simply keeping the beat. It's the one that sets up the rhythm. The rest of the heart is moved through peristaltic motion of arteries and veins. That's actually what's moving the blood through the body. The blood is moving through pulsation that is, of course, set up by the heart, but everything else takes over once that pulse is initiated. And Stephanie has demonstrated not to the point now where she's won a Nobel Prize, but she has demonstrated that the sulfur is the mechanism that entices, coaxes, draws the red corpuscles through the capillaries and onto all the other tissues where they do their job of replenishing the oxygen for every cell in your body, some 50 trillion cells.
Wow. And so the other issue would be then, like, what happens, sometimes the walls of the arteries and the capillaries and everything get stiff, right? And that makes it harder for this pumping action and the blood to flow through the arteries, or maybe it makes them weak. So then the blood can leak out into the body. So does sulfur help with that?
Sulfur decreases the amount of friction between the blood and the artery wall, even if it's a capillary or if it's a vein or an artery. But you've just opened up possibly four different areas of discussion. And for that, we're going to need to go back into the original research done by a Canadian cardiologist by the name of George Willis. This was a gentleman who was just an MD. He was actually a PhD cardiologist. And his area of interest has something to do, well, everything to do with why do arteries and veins restrict flow. And to do that, he decided to study an animal that had no restriction of arteries with plaque of any sort ever, unless you restricted its vitamin C. And that animal was a guinea pig. Guinea pigs don't make vitamin C. Neither do any of the great apes, of which we are one. So this cardiologist research scientist, George Willis, started looking at what happens when you restrict the vitamin C intake for a guinea pig. And of course, you keep guinea pigs in a lab and you can control what they eat. And I'm sure Purina guinea pig chow has plenty of vitamin C in it because they already know that guinea pigs don't make vitamin C. Well, if you alter their chow so that there's no vitamin C coming in through the food, something very interesting starts to happen for the guinea pig. They lose the endothelial lining of their arteries and veins, and the next thing you know, their bodies, which are keeping up with all this sort of devastation, decide to reline the arteries with a premium road patch called lipoprotein A. But that's the first thing the body will use.
And that's true of humans also.
That's true of humans also.
Yeah, so what you're sharing applies to humans.
Right, it's pretty much pan-cultural to mammals in general. Humans and guinea pigs run out of lipoprotein A, and then because the body is very interested in making sure the arteries are not damaged by blood flow, and they no longer have endothelial cells protecting the lining of arteries and veins, once you run out of lipoprotein A, you start using anything you can get your hands on, and that's cholesterol and calcium. And cholesterol and calcium make lousy road patch. Yes, you can protect the artery walls, but the cholesterol and the calcium, it's not a smooth road patch. It builds up in humps and lumps on the insides of the arteries and veins. And the next thing you know, everywhere there's a lump, it starts to build faster. And in the case of humans, after about 50 years of building up humps and lumps made out of the cholesterol and the calcium, you get restriction in flow. Now this contributes to hardening of the artery. But you got to know why it is that the vitamin C was the crucial factor in the guinea pig studies and in human beings. What protects the artery walls and vein walls is a very specialized cell called an endothelial cell. Those cells line the arteries. That layer made of those cells is only one cell thick. And those are very flexible, even jelly-like cells. And like all tissues, they live, they die, they get replaced, and under normal circumstances, they replace themselves all the time, and you never lose the endothelial lining. However, we stopped making vitamin C.
The good news is Sulfurzyme has vitamin C from the wolfberry.
That's right.
It's the perfect blend,
right,
to help the cardiovascular system.
It is.
Yeah.
But this deficiency of vitamin C figures heavily in other matters, such as cell strength, and we'll get to that in a minute. The endothelial lining, once it's deprived of vitamin C, and that's from like a chronic not enough vitamin C, those jelly-like cells they're afflicted with scurvy, and that scurvy makes that cell that was jelly-like and fairly resilient, it turns it into something watery. And those watery cells wash away as the blood passes by. And the next thing you know, you have the interior artery wall exposed to the blood without any protection from the blood. And of course, that sets off a series of reactions. The body, you could even say it panics and says, we got to get something to fix this. So it's lipoprotein A to the rescue.
Or cholesterol. So like when we're taking statins to get rid of cholesterol, we're actually trying to get rid of something that the body's trying to use to fix a problem instead of going to the source of the problem.
Right, right. Now the good news here is you can regrow your endothelial lining. You just have to bring your vitamin C up to a level which will allow that to take place. Now here's another benefit of endothelial cells. That's the tissue that exerts or excretes or produces nitric oxide. The nitric oxide is what causes the arteries and veins to relax so that blood is not restricted in its flow. Without those specialized cells, there's not enough nitric acid to keep those special structures, arteries and veins, relaxed.
So this is why lemongrass becomes very important.
It is.
Because lemongrass, through research in 2006 by Sue Chow, she found that was the essential oil that had the highest levels of producing nitric oxide in the body. Lemongrass essential oil. There are a few others that are beneficial, but that's the best. That's why in this challenge, we're going to take capsules with lemongrass, copaiba for inflammation, because we want to reduce the inflammation, and peppermint, also inflammation, and just to drive in the effectiveness of those other two oils.
Right. Now, interesting, if you have other elements of your diet that are reducing inflammation, you're taking the pressure off of vitamin C to do all of that. Now vitamin C can be utilized in other areas of health and nutrition.
Awesome. Right.
You have so many different uses in your body for vitamin C, but you want to distribute vitamin C to other useful functions rather than detoxifying nicotine.
Yeah. So another thing is, in this challenge we're talking about doing, Time for an Oil Change, we could also add in, we have chewable vitamin C in Young Living that is very effective, and you actually need less of it to be effective in the body than if you're taking other forms. So if somebody felt they needed additional vitamin C, they could take that.
Yes, they could.
Okay. Awesome.
Yes, they could.
So anything else to share about nitric oxide or rebuilding the epithelial cells?
Yes. Individuals lose the epithelial cells because those cells they're the first cells to be harmed by scurvy. And scurvy in other tissues takes a while longer, but it'll kill you.
We don't usually think of Americans as having scurvy.
No, you don't.
You know what I mean? It's not something that we commonly think that would be an issue for us.
Right. But here's another quick aside. It was discovered, and I can't give you the years, but you can look this up, that there was enough vitamin C in limes to keep sailors from having lethal scurvy.
So this is interesting because we add lime essential oil to our red drink. We're putting sulfurzyme in there and lime essential oil with the Ninja Red. We got the whole blend of stuff right there, and then we take a capsule of lemongrass with it. That's a powerhouse for the cardiovascular system.
It is. It is. And here's one more little piece of that story. The British Navy knew for 80 years they could prevent scurvy in sailors. For 80 years they refrained from supplying limes to the sailors. Knew it and discouraged it. And what the thinking was there, I don't know.
Well, okay, so this is very interesting. If there's any other thoughts, I think it sounds pretty complete.
And I'm going to get back to the issue that I wanted to talk to you about, which is salt and hardening of the artery. So, if you can convince someone to stop salting their food, there are these two glands. They're the adrenals. They sit right on top of the kidneys. And one adrenal talks to the other adrenal right after you quit using salt, and it says, hey, what's going on? Did we stumble into a war zone? So what do the adrenals do? To make sure you don't run out of sodium, and this is important for the sodium-potassium ion pump, they excrete a hormone called aldosterone. And aldosterone is the hormone responsible for you holding on to any sodium you have in your body so that you don't run out.
So that you don't have hardening of the arteries.
Well, it's interesting. Once you switch over to having to use aldosterone to conserve sodium, that's when the arteries begin to harden.
Wow, that's very interesting.
That is very interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's also things we have to support the adrenals in Young Living.
Yes.
You know, energy oil blend is one thing. Nutmeg oil, rosemary oil, those are really good supports. And B vitamins.
And B vitamins. These are all good things to take. And I strongly urge you to support your adrenals because in modern society, it is stress, stress, stress. And stress is what's killing us more than anything else.
So would you say then that when the adrenals are stressed, that's the beginning of hardening of the arteries?
Well, if they're having to excrete aldosterone to save your life because you don't have any sodium, yes.
Okay.
That's a stress on the
adrenals. And this whole balance of sodium, potassium, and what was the other thing? Water or what?
Well,
you need that balance for cellular function.
Once you stop salting your food, your blood volume goes down. And that is responsible partially for why your blood pressure drops. But it's only temporary. Your blood pressure is going to go right back up to where it was. Now you're back to having to rely on nitrous oxide being excreted by various tissues that you may or may not have.
Well, so let's go back to then taking an essential oil that increases nitrous oxide is going to solve the issue of hardening of the arteries, hopefully.
It will go a long way.
Yes, and that's why we're talking about in this time for an oil change. We're going to finally coming full circle. We're going to do the red drink with the sulfurzyme, the lime oil, and the Ninja Red, all powerful cardiovascular support.
Yes.
And the capsules with the lemongrass, which is a powerful oil. You could take 2 a day, but 1 is what we're recommending as a beginning point, and then maybe build up to 2. And that lemongrass capsule is going to really support with the increase of nitrous oxide, that health of the cardiovascular system. So let's see how it all goes. We can check back, and maybe we'll talk with you again. Thank you.
You're welcome.